Welcome to X-Men Evolution, episode 40 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men animated recap podcast. I'm JC, and October's going to be really busy for me. I'm starting with like 5 panels at LA Comic-Con, but we got a bunch of other stuff going on today, so I'm going to let Rod keep it rolling.
Okay, and I'm Rod. If I seem a little bit tired, it's because I just got done recording the second episode of my new podcast called Millennial Sleepover. I interview and talk to like songwriters and artists from like the 90s, early aughts. By the time this episode of Cyclops is Waiting for Me releases, my very first episode with All American Rejects will have released, and they talk about Gives You Hell, writing it, performing it, and then also new music that you listening will now know what it is, but contractually I'm not allowed to say what it is right now. But they're making their big comeback, baby, and yeah, check that out if you were a 90s or 2000s kid and you like music from that time period, because hopefully I'll be talking to a lot of those artists thanks to my unhinged TikTok channel. And on a complete tangent, we're excited to introduce today's guest from Tales of the Stinky Dragon and the Class of X podcast, John Reisinger.
Hi, guys.
Hi, John.
Thanks for inviting me to come talk X-Men, something that I have a hard time saying no to anybody.
Well, I took advantage of that then.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on. So, briefly, for those who might not know you, tell us quickly what you've been working on and, you know, what's exciting in your world.
Sure. I'm one of those former Rooster Teeth employees that was working there for a little over a decade until the closure. Me and 6 of my closest friends and coworkers, we went independent with our show Tales from Stinky Dragon. And we went, I guess, public with that a couple months ago, and it's going really well. In fact, this week we got to finally announce something we've been working on for a while, which is we are partnering with Critical Role's platform, Beacon, and so we're also going to be on Beacon on top of our Patreon, which is our way that we are running our business and funding our business. And so yeah, so that's mostly what I'm doing is trying to be a small business owner and run a media company that is based around D&D. But in my off time, the reason why I'm here is that I do nothing but read comics and talk about X-Men as much as I can, which is not often enough. I am an old man, and I have been reading comics for a few decades at this point. And so I imagine that's all I can bring to any of these conversations, just dated old references from too many comic books. But I'm excited to talk about some X-Men evolution and that kind of stuff. Obviously, as anybody who's an X-Men fan, this show holds a special place in my heart.
So interestingly enough, John, for full context, Rod and we were in college when this show came out, so we never watched any of these episodes until this watch.
Wow.
So Rod saw the episode for the first time literally 24 hours ago.
Wow. When did these, 2003, is that when this was?
Like early
that
2000s,
was when this episode was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have been a junior in college at that time.
Okay.
So
yeah, that would have this episode would have been. I guess I'm not that much older, but this episode would have come out when my first year of college is what this episode would come in. Mm-hmm. I turn 40 tomorrow, actually.
Oh,
happy belated birthday as of when this airs live
there
for
you
people.
go.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I turned 42 years ago, and my joints have never been the same. So
there you go. I'm joined by fellow old people. I love it.
Yep. No, I turned 42 a week ago, so just stretch more than you think you should. That's my only advice to anybody.
As soon as I went through a divorce like a little over a decade ago, and as soon as that happened, I immediately went, I got to get this thing into shape and put my my bod back into a place that I was happy with, and I've been trying to maintain it since.
Very smart. Very smart. Well, Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where we're going back and watching every single X-Men animated episode we can find. The podcast started with the original 1992 X-Men the Animated Series, building up to the release of X-Men 97. As many people knew, there was a little bit of delay with 97, so we found a bunch of other shows. We also have our companion show, the Xavier Files, with interviews with members of the X-Men community, including some of the voice actors, and a shit poster so far, and maybe expand into some more. Since season 2 of X-Men 97 is quite a ways off, like animation ways off, we're back to watching the second half of our first watch through of X-Men Evolution.
Real quick reminders, we're a recap show about a series that started over 20 years ago. There are going to be spoilers, and if you don't want it spoiled for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, and come back. We are not currently sponsored or affiliated with Marvel, Marvel Animation, Disney, Disney Plus, or Hulu in any way, shape, or form.
And don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, X, and Facebook. Of course, make sure to follow us on all your favorite podcast services. I'm glad that we're in video now so people can see me struggle with the script in real time.
Yeah, we can't have those jump cuts the way that we used to. Now on to the show. Today we're going to be talking about season 3, episode 10, titled X-23. It originally aired on August 2nd of 2003, which was 9 months after the previous episode had aired. Currently sits at a 7.6 star rating on IMDb. And before we get into it, John, just wanted to share with people the reason why I specifically asked you for this episode. You were the person who taught me via some random Twitter post back before we all left Twitter that X-23 was created for this show before she debuted in Marvel Comics officially.
Yeah, she's kind of gone through, like, as I was watching this show, I was like, she's actually gone through like almost like 3 separate origin stories. Mm-hmm. Like, this would be her actual, well, actually almost like 4 now if you include the movie. But this was like where she began. She's one of the rare characters that started in animation. It's like her and Harley Quinn, you know, that are of note. There's plenty more, I'm sure. But and then she made her way into NYX, which was an okay little small series. But in my heart, her real origin was her own solo origin series, X-23, and then from there she got introduced into the X-Men comics, and now she became so prevalent in the comics. I think that's why she then got to be in like the Logan movie, because she became, like, I don't think it's stupid to say, like, a fan favorite. X-23 Laura, like, people love her, like, enough where, like, when spoiler, Wolverine died at one point in the comics. Spoiler, it didn't stick, it never does. And when he was dead, she took over as Wolverine, and now they're both called Wolverine. It's very confusing in the comics.
Right. And then to bring it all back around, the current book that she's main roster in, I believe, is NYX, the 2024 version of it. Yeah.
Their whole new relaunch in a post Krakoan era. She's in it. All the way back to NYX, which is not even the second version of NYX. I think NYX has been tried to be done like 3 times now. But yeah, this was fun. I have not, like, that was 2003, so we're talking 20 years since. I don't like saying that. 20 years since I've seen this. It was like watching it for the first time. I don't remember jack squat of this. So that was extra fun. That was very fun to watch her. You know, like, an animator was the one who decided to make her. That's so cool.
Yeah, he was one of the producers on the show, Craig Kyle, who is the one who pitched it to Marvel that got it into the show and then later into NYX. So. Yeah. I will say one thing that stood out to me about X-23. One, we don't get her name. They actually didn't reveal her name until the comic, so we don't know that her name is actually Laura in this.
It's true.
But it was not the voice I was expecting for her, because I've read her in my mind with a different voice that was a little more like harsh and gravelly, and she was very like cutesy almost in a way. Like, she felt very similar, like your Magmas and Jean Greys and stuff like that. Like, I was like, oh, that was not the voice I was expecting this little killer to spout out with.
You guys have been watching this show, so this wouldn't have been jarring, but I would go so far as to, since I haven't been watching X-Men Evolution for quite a while, all their voices were jarring. Even when Beast talks, I'm like, that's not Beast voice, because I have watched X-Men 97 as of recently, and that is harkening back to the voice actors from the original X-Men. And so at the very least, it needs to be that or Kelsey Grammer. That's Beast to me at this point. And this almost like young, less academic sounding Beast was jarring. And even Wolverine, like, I do remember this Wolverine from X-Men Evolution, but they're all very different sounding voices than what I'm used to. But I would agree. She doesn't even talk like a word until like the 19th minute of the episode. It's mostly a lot of efforts that voice actors had to record for like 20 minutes of the show.
Yeah, and then she's like crying at one point, and it's like, I would say the only voice actor who didn't jar me when we started watching this was probably Cyclops. And even though it's not the same voice as Norm was in the original series, it does feel like a younger version of that.
It's a very Cyclops voice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because you're just expecting like over-serious white guy. You're like, good.
Yeah.
Okay, that works.
Vanilla Man.
Yeah.
That's what Cyclops is for the most part. I actually have a question.
Please.
I'm gonna tell on myself because I haven't watched this show in forever. Who the heck is Ray? At the top of this episode, we after like the whole X-23 introduction, we go to the campus and then we're with a bunch of the new mutants, the young mutants with like Cannonball and Iceman. And I know obviously with X-23, this show made up a lot of characters, even Spike in the first season.
Right.
Who's Ray?
So Ray was in like 4 issues ever of the comic. They were in an offshoot group of the Morlocks. They were called the Tunnelers. Yeah, I'm not kidding.
Even I think that sounds made up. That's funny.
Some of the Tunnelers, I believe, got killed during the Marauders Mutant Massacre.
Okay.
And then Berserker Ray fought Cyclops and ended up electrocuting himself.
Okay.
And then years later, when Selene brought back a bunch of mutants like as zombies, he was one of those people that was brought back as a zombie. But I think that was all across like literally
Necrotia? Is that what that was called?
I think it was Necrotia. Yeah.
I love Necrotia. I love anything Selene. She's a drag queen. She's the keys to my heart.
She's a pain in the ass in Marvel Snap, though, and I'm not a fan of her unless I'm playing my Hobgoblin deck. But that's a whole other tangent. So
I think JC even said in previous episodes, he was like, "It's weird that they're featuring Berserker in so much stuff."
Right?
So I assume he was just introduced as one of the other young new mutants alongside like
in this season, yeah.
In the season 2 stuff where they introduced Bobby, Roberto, Magma, Jubilee, who sometimes is there, and So
was that Jamie Madrox who was also in there? Was that Multiple Man who was like
yeah.
Okay,
he's
like hanging upside down with the ropes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's literally 12. They call out his age in it because he's like everybody else is like a teenager, and then he's like way too young to be in combat training.
Yeah.
They all are. They all are. That's how it works.
Which is the point of the episode, right?
Child soldiers. It's just part of the X-Men way.
Yep. So episode does kick off with a quick previously on. We see that there's stuff with the rogue power possession. But then the weird part about this show to me is it literally will just go from a flashback fluidly into the episode. Like there's no signal that the previously on is over.
No transition, and Wolverine's looking at a screen. I'm like, oh, we're in the show. Okay, we're in the show.
Yep. So it's a mutant database. We see that somebody is looking through this. Obviously, we know it's X-23 by watching the episode. And then the outfit design to me, and John, I know like with the Rooster Teeth stuff, you're like, adjacent to a lot of video game stuff. It felt a little bit like Splinter Cell combined with the Talons from the Batman series.
It also, I imagine this is like afterwards, but like Honey Badger, who is the clone of X-23 later on.
Right.
She has a costume that has those like striped, they're not shoulder pads, they're like bicep pads or something. And so that must be a motif that they like to, they wanted to kind of continue into there. On the screen that she's looking at, there's all this information about Wolverine. Did you guys catch his blood type?
It was like D plus mutant or something like that.
D plus mutated. I was like, what is this?
Yep. It also would drive any of our friends who have graphic design experience nuts because there was like issues with kerning and capitalization and stuff like that. I also like they say his they don't know where he's from. It's like question marks, but probably Canada. And then they list like social security number with question marks too. Like
that's funny.
Yeah. So that was one of those like pause and check it out for all the little detail scenarios.
Yeah.
So she then stabs the screen when Logan's picture is on it. And then just, you see her escaping this SHIELD facility. And I was like, are they going to let her stab people? Like, I was kind of like, are they going to go for it? And then I remembered this was still that legit Saturday morning cartoon era. So
no blood the entire episode because you can't let it happen.
Yeah. And then Rod, because you're not as familiar with the character, did you know about the foot blade too?
Oh, only because Daphne Keane talked about it.
Okay,
That's fun.
So John, like a little back. I didn't grow up reading the comics because the area I grew up in didn't have a lot of comic stores, and so like I know the original X-Men cartoon show, the X-Men movies that I hated, and the toys.
Yeah.
And so like X-23, like I only really found out about through Logan, the movie.
Yeah, most people did.
Yeah. And so like Daphne Keane, when she did Logan, there was a footage of her being like, "Oh, the foot blade," and I was like, so that's the only reason I knew about that foot blade.
Yeah, it's fun to see there's so many iterations of Wolverine's family at this point, because there's X-23. He has a son named Daken. Like I said, there's Honey Badger, who is Gabby, who is a clone of X-23. And I love it that the little game they keep playing with each of these like little offshoots of Wolverine is they try to do a different combination of numbers of blades
and the locations of them too,
and locations. So X-23's got the 2 blades on the hands and the 1 on the foot. Daken has 2 on the top of his hand and 1 on the bottom of his hand, so it's like a triangle. Gabby has just 1 lone spike that comes out of the top of her hand, and I think they come out of her foot as well.
I think so. I think she has 2 in the feet.
And then if you really want to get bad, you can talk about Romulus, who is the origin of Wolverine that we do not talk about.
No, we do not support that.
But I think he just had a glove that was like a Freddy Krueger glove that was all 5 adamantium claws coming out of his fingers. Anyways, it's fun. You know, like they got to be a little different from Wolverine. They're all going to have healing factors. They're all going to have berserker problems. They're all going to have issues with their origin. But you know, you can tell them apart. You know, even when Laura's fully covered in a leather outfit. Oh, she's got 2 claws. You know who that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We see there all these agents are trying to catch this spy and everything like that, and she's able to get away. One thing that is impressive about her is her ability to cut like clearly through every single wall and cement floor that she wants to very, very easily with these claws, like more than it seems like Wolverine has been able to in this show so far, at least. Like, she's making clean cuts and getting through stuff. So this is the cartoon came out before the comic explained this. Mm-hmm. But let's retroactively say the comic had it correctly, which is in the comic, when they grafted the adamantium to her skeleton, which they only did to her claws. Canonically, until the Krakoan era, when someone screwed up when they made a clone of her, when they were all dying, she only has adamantium on her claws. And they did that so that her healing factor could work even better than Wolverine's. Right, because she's not constantly being poisoned by it.
Yeah. And so when they grafted the adamantium to her skeleton, which I love that in this cartoon, when they showed that, they went like the kind of route of like the original X-Men cartoon, which is you can't show horrific surgery of someone's body being opened up and being grafted with metal. It's like it's absorbed through like the skin. Mm-hmm. They did the same thing, but in the comic, they sharpened her claws so that when they put metal on them, they were even sharper than Wolverine's. So there you go.
There we go.
A poor attempt at after the show, why she was able to do that.
So we jump into the intro, and it's like, I think we've had a few of these recently where the cold opens are like 2.5, 3 minutes long on some of these. Like, they're the long cold opens before it. And then we don't, unfortunately, watch the animated intro for this one as much as we would for like 97 and 92.
Yeah.
But they did actually do a new intro starting in this episode.
Oh,
interesting.
I skipped this one. So.
I figured you would. Coming back from the intro, we see that there's a training montage going on with Bobby and Berserker paired up, and it's Wolverine essentially doing the child soldier thing of getting all these kids ready for, you know, the inevitable mutant apocalypse that's probably coming. So
I thought it was, let's say, adorable when so Berserker's the one who fell through the grate into the floor. And then these guns, these like turrets opened up, and I was like, oh, they're going to start shooting lasers at Bobby. And he ducks down, and they were like little Nerf balls? I don't know what they were.
Yeah, they were the equivalent of like tennis balls or like racquetball balls, essentially. Yeah. And they didn't have the ability to aim up and down, so Bobby just stayed low and he was totally safe.
It's Mega Man rules. If it shoots out one direction, it doesn't go up or down.
No.
In one plane.
Yeah, one plane, that's all it is.
And then Bobby did what I would probably do in that situation of like, I'll come back and get you later and just try to win the competition. Because he sees Multiple, who I love that they just call him Multiple, not Multiple Man, because he's 12. Yeah, in an earlier episode, they call him just Multiple.
That's so good. Because he's not a man yet. He's a little boy.
Yeah, and then they didn't give him actual voiceover. It was just like generic child laughing that reminded me of the Saban ending from the original cartoon. Yeah, those fucking kids. We run by Cannonball, who is under a net. And to the point of like the voices being jarring, Cannonball to me is like good old country boy. And this felt like too just like regular, like, I don't know, like Northeast kid. It didn't have that like Southern boy charm to him.
Also, you guys have been watching this, so this wasn't surprising to you, but his like the way they animated his powers was surprising to me, where instead of it being like a fiery explosion that kind of originates around his waist, it was like black tornado coming out of his lower section.
It also looked different in this episode than I think we've seen it in other episodes. Like there was something that they changed from a design perspective, but it looked almost like what was the character? It was like Ink in Batman Beyond, I want to say.
Yeah.
Like it was a little like more fluid rather than it being explosive like what we're used to from the comics or with previews they gave us in 92. So
maybe they animated this episode like earlier than other ones, and then they realized like, oop, we did bad Cannonball, let's fix it.
Yeah. So.
Or the reverse, they're like, nobody paid attention, this is save some money.
Yeah. We're tired of drawing all these clouds and fire. We're just gonna make it this stretchy black thing that he stretches from.
Nope. And Bobby gets to the end, sees Logan, gets kind of like told like, you know, you left your whole team behind, so nobody won. And that's where copters appear, and it's S.H.I.E.L.D. coming to pick up Logan. And I love the Xavier interaction with Logan at this point, because it's why would he think that you had anything to do with this breakout? And Logan's response is, he doesn't. Because if he did, he wouldn't be coming in nicely and asking me to go on the plane with him.
Nick Fury is the one who shows up at that point?
Yeah.
Was it... I think this is funny. At this point, seeing a white Nick Fury was jarring. I was like, that's not right.
Because in the comics, it wasn't until Original Sin that they did the swap over of Nick.
Yeah.
So we only would have had the ultimate version of Nick Fury in the in the world that was the Sam Jackson style.
And he's not even in like modern comics anymore in any of like the major titles.
He's the Watcher replacement right now.
That's right. That's right. He what was that crossover called?
That was Original Sin.
That was Original Sin. Okay, that was Original Sin.
Yeah,
where
because he killed the Watcher.
He killed the Watcher. What a weird crossover comic. Yeah, I guess he's out there doing the Watcher stuff now.
Nope.
I forgot about that. I think I forgot about it because it doesn't matter. It has had no bearing on any other story since then.
No. I only got reminded of Original Sin recently because I've been going through a lot of my weekly issues that I'm turning a bunch of them into my comic book store for credit because I ran out of room to keep them. And I just got to the boxes that had a bunch of Original Sin stuff, and I'm looking through and I'm like, don't care. And I'm like, well, that is now store credit. So
the one cool thing that came out of Original Sin was because of Original Sin, we get Lady Thor. Because
I forgot about that.
Original Sin is where Nick Fury squares up against the Avengers, and he one-shots Thor by whispering something mysterious into his ear, and that makes Thor no longer worthy of his hammer, and so his hammer's left on the moon, and then that's where Jane finds it. So thank you, Original Sin, because we got Lady Thor, who is one of my favorite Thors ever, and I love Thor. That was a great run of the comics. Russell Dodderman did the art for that run, and that was so good. That was so good. So yeah, that's the one thing we get.
That's why we got I forgot that's why we got her. Yeah,
Yeah.
Now that you say it, I do remember that scene though.
It was a cool moment of like whispering something mysterious into his ear, and then he can't pick up Mjolnir anymore. So that's fun.
Yeah. So they take Logan back to the base. They give him an introduction to this doctor, and she proceeds to call him Weapon X, which might be the dumbest thing to do when going up and saying hello to Logan. So we find out that she is a former Hydra scientist, and that X-23 was their 23rd attempt, which even on a cartoon where they're not showing the violent aspect, that's pretty dark, because what they do with the failures.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're in the back.
Is there a significance to 23 other than it's not even a Disney thing? Like besides,
No, there is no significance.
Because now it kind of seems synchronous with Disney, you know, because like everything's 23 with Disney.
No,
Yeah.
D23 and all that stuff.
The funny thing is that technically the X in Weapon X is also a 10.
10, yeah.
So she's 1023.
There you go.
Yeah, and then because Cap is technically Weapon 1. Yep.
When was that? That was that all new X-Men? Was that Grant Morrison that did that?
I think so, because we got Phantom X in that,
That was
era too.
the Phantom X thing where we figured out that the X was a number, and Wolverine and Phantom X is what? He's like 12, something like that. I can't
12
remember.
or 13.
12
one
or
of those.
13.
Yeah. This is also the first time we've recorded since that announcement where it has naturally come up. The outfits in the second season of X-Men 97 are going to be inspired by the Morrison run.
Yeah, that's fun. Those came out of Bryan Singer's X-Men, where they were scared to use color, and so everybody's in black leather. And I will admit that the Grant Morrison run of New X-Men, I like the costumes; they're pretty good. They dressed my girl Emma Frost like a goddess, and so I can't be upset. I'm excited about that because X-Men 97 felt like it pulled all the greatest Chris Claremont stories to turn into episodes like Inferno and stuff like that, and then skipped into Grant Morrison era and went like Genosha and that kind of stuff. So if they're gonna do more Grant Morrison stuff, I'm fine with that. Grant Morrison, it's either read Chris Claremont, read Grant Morrison, or read John Hickman, and that's the best eras of X-Men.
Yeah. And aside from him not being a good person, I will say Astonishing is one of my favorite runs. That was actually when I got back into comics. It was the time of Astonishing and House of M. So
we'll just credit Astonishing to the late John Cassidy.
Yeah.
And who will be like this great man who's gone now. He's the reason why we have Astonishing X-Men. We don't talk about the other guy.
I fully back you. The Doctor puts a CD-ROM in, and you see this little mini documentary from Hydra. I love that they finally addressed this in the cartoon, where Wolverine asks her, "Why would you work for the bad guys?" And then she basically gives the answer of like, I had no oversight. I could do literally whatever I want, and I didn't have to worry about regulations. And it's the first time in a cartoon I feel like that is honestly addressed by anybody. So
she had nothing to lose. She was there to tell her truth.
X-23 fights a bunch of these murder robots, and the Doctor says, well, they all kept failing, but we figured out the big thing that was missing was your healing factor. And also says they made some adjustments and variations into her that led to explosive anger, but no other emotions from her. So,
except there were.
Yeah,
there were. Yeah. Well, they think they did it. How about that? They think they did that.
But also, I love it took scientists, like a team of scientists, 22 children, to figure out, the healing thing, that would have come in handy.
You mean this kid that keeps popping bones out of their hand? We need to give them some sort of healing factor?
And that's funny because they kind of fixed that a little bit in her comic book origin, where it is Wolverine's genetic material from the start. It's the female aspect, the chromosomes, is what finally clinches it. And so it would that's why she and I like that in the comic, because that gave a reason why it was if they're trying to make like, you know, a perfect clone weapon of Wolverine, why then is it a girl? It's because they had to for it to work. Because this is like from an era in the comics where they can't just pop out clones like Skittles.
Of course. Back at the mansion, we see Beast and Multiple are like diving onto each other inside the bushes. And then we start seeing that X-23 is having these flashbacks anytime there's something in front of her that triggers and brings up an emotion and stuff like that. So she's remembering like training in the rain in particular. It looks like they're throwing pillows at her, which doesn't seem that dangerous.
It was like light sandbags.
Yeah.
This was like a rated G version of like Homelander's origin story, right?
Yeah. It's still sad.
Yeah.
You know?
It's abusive, but it's like they just can't show blood or hard things.
No. They can't actually like strike this child. They can't draw blood. That's why I say, like, if you want a really interesting read of her origin, read the comic, because they go explicit with the comic. They allude in the comic to she has self-harming problems that come from mental, you know, PTSD from her training. It's rough. It's like the Logan movie. Like the Logan movie is pretty rough to watch.
Yeah.
You know, and so. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to switch back and forth from the cartoons where they have to get past, you know, whatever the TV version of MPAA was, and then the comics where, you know, they can get a little more spicy.
Well, especially by the 2000s where the comics code was just fully thrown out at that point. So they were like, let's go for it.
Yeah, it's funny. I just read, they just had a crossover series called Blood Hunt, which was a fun little Blade vampire story. And this was... I think they were trying something out where they had the regular release of it, and then they had the red band release, kind of like red band trailers in movies. And the red band was going to be more explicit and graphic, but it honestly wasn't. In my opinion, wasn't that much different. There were a few other, like, there were obviously panels that were a little different, but it just kind of speaks to how what you're saying, where they can get pretty graphic now in the comics and no one really cares. Marvel and DC try to kind of pull the line, but especially if you read something like Image, you talk about Homelander and that kind of stuff. Those things are graphic as can be.
Yeah, one of my favorite series from the Krakoan era is X-Terminators. And
I love that. I love that.
It gave a warning for like explicit content, but they still like censored out them saying fuck. Vampires are getting shredded, but it still has like asterisks and stuff like that instead of saying fuck in there. So
that was a fun little mini series, X-Terminators.
Yeah. So we also see that there's like I believe it's Bobby and Roberto who hit Sam with a tree. And Sam like concusses himself yet again. This version of Sam is just like a bumbling idiot by comparison to what we're used to in the comics.
Is he invulnerable when he's doing his blast thing in the cartoon? Okay, he's fine then.
Yeah, but he always is like dizzy after the fact too.
Yeah, he probably isn't fine, but that's what we're all assuming, so we keep watching.
Yeah. I mean, They threw this out the window, but at one point in the comics, Sam is immortal. He's like a part of like an immortal race of like mutants, and they like he's like he can't die. They threw that out the window. That's too complicated when they let the X-Men be that way, or at least just one of them. And so I doubt that's the case for this one. But maybe that's some copium you can give yourself.
For me, it was his body is protected, that like he's not gonna like, you know, shred himself or like get bruised and stuff like that. But his brain is still bumping around inside of his skull, so that's the damage he's doing to himself.
Yeah, like football players.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like having a helmet with no give and getting into an accident. So. But then we see that X-23 is up in the branch and she's like looking down and like pulls out her claws like she's ready to go for it with him. And then we cut back. They're talking about more of the stuff with the doctor, and she stayed because she wanted to be there to protect X-23. They show her in flashbacks where she's seeing families where she's like learning to blend in with people. But anytime that there was like a happy family around her, like at the park, she would like do something destructive. Like she broke some poor girl's music box, which I still don't know why a kid would bring a music box to a picnic or to a park, but that is what it is.
It's like one of those carryover things. We talk about this all the time about like, the previous generation makes entertainment for the next one,
Yeah.
So like it was what would this been like, either like older Gen X or boomers making this cartoon for like millennials or whatever. And so like, so when we see like people play jacks in the park and stuff, it's like, that kind of makes sense, but who does that? Like,
Yeah. That's funny.
Yep. She starts breaking into the mansion at this point, and then one of the only time, like, we don't love to point out continuity errors because mistakes happen. It just is what it is. But one thing that was a weird choice for me is she's spying on Storm, and Storm is making a little cloud above her plant to water it, which does make sense. Except she's literally having lightning strikes hit the tree. I was just very confused by that.
the electrolytes.
Yeah.
That's not how that works.
There's going to be idiocracy rules. It's the electrolytes.
And then you see she oversees Kitty with Nightcrawler messing around in their room. You see Scott and Jean flirting with each other. And at this point, they haven't had like the talk of what their relationship is. And
Season 3?
they have not had the talk yet.
They keep being interrupted.
They've like edged against it, but they haven't actually had the conversation yet. The part that I love is Jean uses her telekinesis to spray Scott in the face, and Scott's reaction is to take the plate that he has and like hold it up over his head like he's gonna throw it at her.
He knew she could stop it. She's Phoenix.
Yeah. Cutting back to the SHIELD facility, we see that Fury has buried the lead and then tells, after all of this, that X-23 had accessed the X-Men files. And it feels like that's probably the thing he should have led with before bringing Wolverine off-site.
Or like bring a laptop to Xavier's school and have this presentation there.
Or bring the CD with you.
Yeah, bring the CD. It was like a CD.
There's the one disc.
Yeah, we didn't have to email stuff. They literally had it on a CD. So
I love
Wolverine says he wants to go alone. He thinks he can handle it, and Fury's only willing to give him 1 hour. X-23 is checking through the rooms. It looks like it's Jean's room. Opens a box, and that's when Cannonball comes in. And then she charges him with a claw out. So they give you the impression there's going to be a stabbing.
Yeah.
But then it's just Sam getting put through the wall, and he has this little device on his forehead. So
it's so clearly like they wanted her to take them all out, but they can't have her take them out with her claws. So she somehow left this facility with like 50 of these devices to disable every single X-Men in the building.
Right after the doctor was like, she has unchecked rage because of the way we like engineered her. Also, she's very like humane when she's taking
Yeah.
What was the story, John? I think it was Wolverine, Enemy of the State, where he just like offed a bunch of SHIELD personnel when he was brainwashed.
Oh yeah, I mean there's so many Wolverine stories where he's like controlled by some other entity and he is used as literally just a slice and dicer for human bodies.
Yeah, it just reminded me of like what would this have been if this was like the adult version of the show? Because
I mean, it would have been.
She could have killed like half of the team at least.
It would have been it would have been her first mission they sent her on in the comic, which was to assassinate this political figure at one of his events, and she just eviscerates an entire crowd of people, including children, like body parts strewn on the ground. I mean, you're talking about Old Man Logan is what you're really talking about. Old Man Logan's the story of Wolverine being manipulated by Mysterio to literally kill everybody in the X-Men mansion.
Yeah, I'm still disappointed we didn't get that in the Logan movie, but
Old Man Logan.
I understand why we didn't get it.
Yeah.
Oh. And then she proceeds to take out Bobby after she already downed Kitty, Jean, and Kurt. And then Cyclops and Berserker find a downed Xavier. They must have just had the voice actor for Berserker just there that day, because I feel like he got more screen time in this episode than he has literally the entire rest of the series at this point.
This is his moment.
Yeah, they gave him his moment. Door is about to open, and we don't have the same commercial break like anticipation like when originally watching it. You see a shadow comes back from commercial, and it's Rogue. They are like, oh well, we gotta get out of here, and then they spot the piece on their foreheads, and this happened in season 1, John, where the reaction of all the guys in the show is just to blow stuff up as a way of fixing it.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking like, oh, if they try to electrocute that thing, it's going to blow up somebody's head. So boys in this show just love blowing shit up, essentially.
Yeah, they don't want to think about like, why is this thing blinking a red light? Don't worry, I've got electric powers, and I'm a child. I'll handle this.
And every single time they almost blew something up, it would have been fatal had they blown it up too.
Listen, I actually have teenagers. This tracks. This tracks. This is their logic. If you gave teenagers these powers, this is what you're gonna get.
Yeah, I'm scared of what Rod and I would do at our age with these powers.
Yeah.
Teenagers would scare the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost died every summer anyway, so let alone superpowers.
Yeah.
So at that point, Wolverine stops them from doing it. Cyclops is asking for an explanation. Wolverine doesn't give it. He just says it's complicated, and then proceeds to have a hole cut in the floor below him.
I love that. It was very Underworld.
Yeah.
Like when she shoots the bullets in the ground to fall down. It was great.
Yeah, and just like perfect, like trapdoor style.
Yeah.
One of my buddies in the digital space, Justin Flom, created a trapdoor in his house that he could literally just like step through and fall perfectly through the floor between the levels of his home. Because
that seems safe.
I think I saw a viral video about that.
Justin's a magician, so yeah.
All right.
Yeah. He's also the one, John, I know, I think I've heard you say you're a pretty big Disney fan. Mm-hmm. He does the spray paint stuff where it's like stencils, and then you do the big reveal, and it's like Disney princesses or Marvel characters, like when you pull the stencils away. So
that's fun.
Yeah. And then we get the confrontation finally between Wolverine and X-23. And the thing that stood out the most to me is this version of Wolverine has so much control over himself, because everything he's doing, he is not throwing a punch. Everything is a defensive action, and it's almost like a Muhammad Ali kind of scenario where it's just kind of like, let her tire herself out because he doesn't want to give her a reason to be filled with rage and aggressive and such. So,
which really shouldn't work, because her healing factor gives her like stamina that should last for like a week.
Yeah,
it's an emotional exhaustion.
Okay.
Did you, what was their first encounter like in the comics, John? Because I didn't read that actually when the two of them cross paths. And sorry if I'm putting you on the spot. Yeah,
that's a good question. It wasn't. I know it wasn't a fight like this because because the time between her escaping the facility she was made at and then her meeting Wolverine is quite a longer distance, as opposed to going straight to the school for revenge on her genetic origins.
So it's not that aggro relationship.
No, it wasn't aggro. Yeah. It was more of a sad story, and not her. She wasn't there on a mission to kill the X-Men. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to rack my brain to think if they've ever even fought, like had a bloody fight. I don't think they have, which makes sense because they are in the comics a father-daughter relationship, and he almost immediately takes her under his wing because he's like in this cartoon sees or has a sense of responsibility for this poor creature that was created because of him.
Yeah, and I love the scene here where he's like, I know what happened. It's right as he popped his claws for her just to stop her from stabbing him and stuff like that. And he's like, I didn't know. And he's like, no kid should be putting up with what you just went through. And it was like an emotional scene from a version of Wolverine that we haven't gotten much emotion out of. Like, We haven't gotten to Wolverine and the X-Men yet, so I don't know how he is there. But this version of Wolverine, I don't want to say he's one note, but we haven't gotten like a deeper exploration of the character in this show. So, but I kind of love that it was just like, you know, you didn't deserve this. So
yeah, it was very heartfelt. It was very sad.
Right before that happened, I do want to kick back to one note that they actually threw in the Rider kick, which a lot of people know from the Marvel vs. Capcom games. That's Rogue's kick, which also made it into X-Men 97. And that was like memes going crazy for that. But that went all the way back to like the Super Sentai shows and stuff in Kamen Rider. So
I loved all the Capcom X-Men game references in X-Men 97.
It was
in my opinion, those are the best X-Men video games we've gotten so far. And they're like, 2D fighting games.
And I maybe have the physical pre-order for those that it's coming out in December.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah. So I definitely have that coming. And then that's when she starts crying. Wolverine's like, I'm the closest thing you got to a family. And he tells her to let the feelings win. At that point, we hear the helicopters coming in the distance, and he just says, go, I'll take care of it. Which is kind of wild to me because it's just like she's off on her own. And it's like, is she going to be safe? Is she going to be a danger to people? Are people going to be hunting her? All that stuff. But at the time, he really didn't have any other options for it. So
he could track her.
He also saw that she clearly doesn't take anybody actually out. So he's like, yeah, she doesn't even know.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. That's true. Yeah. He's like, you didn't kill anybody. No, everyone's got their 10 fingers and 10 toes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for not killing my entire team.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the smart thing to do because the first person she slaps one of those things on, I think, is Professor X. The smart thing to do if like she was there to like do the mission would be to take out Professor X, and she didn't. So that's restraint.
She did do a great job of tricking him by sitting at the chessboard, which I think this is the first time we've seen the chessboard in Evolution too, because that was such an iconic thing for all of those live action movies. So
that was a tactic she does in the comics. That's what they used to their advantage because they were like, it's just a little girl. It was very, very macho. But they use her to like kind of make her way into places that normally people can't get into. Her first mission, she is dressed up as a disabled girl who just wants to like meet the politician. She has like the kind of crutches and is dressed up in a way she looks very meek and mild. So it works.
Yeah. Fury arrives and Wolverine just gives him you're not going to go after her. And it's different than what we saw in the previous episode with Fury, where it was going back and like revisiting the Captain America relationship that Wolverine had and stuff like that, where this was him just literally standing his ground to Fury and being like, you're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think his ship left without him too. I was watching the thing. And like the camera pans away from Fury to his copter in the back, and then the copter takes off and goes away, as though they're like, well, we couldn't get the girl, we might as well leave Fury. I don't know how he was getting home.
I think they needed to leave Fury as to give some form of way that the devices were getting removed from everybody's heads. Sure. Because otherwise there's no explanation, and like I guess wait till the battery runs out would have been the only other way, as the entire team is down.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next scene is like 3 months later.
Yeah, everyone's just napping.
Yeah. The next scene is Rogue sitting in the sunlight, and she's starting to feel better. You get Logan at the door, and she doesn't really want to go with Logan for the training because he's essentially known as like a taskmaster within it. And then he goes out to the New Mutants kids and is like, all right, we're going to do something a little bit different. And in the previous episode, we did have a reference to mutant baseball. So the reference was mutant dodgeball, followed it. And I love how it was essentially like, all right, everybody hit Bobby with the ball. So
more child abuse.
We actually ended the episode on a positive note, which we haven't gotten a lot of either this season. Like this season has been very like negative, cliffhangery and stuff like that. So it was nice to end an episode on a lighthearted note. So.
Yeah, because like Logan learned that he's facilitating something not so different from what he had to go through. So he's like, oh shit, we are raising child soldiers.
Yeah.
Dodgeball day makes up for everything. We'll have pizza afterwards.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's the pizza party afterwards makes up for the military training.
Yeah.
that
Tomorrow
replaces your
we do
childhood.
waterboarding.
Yeah.
So, final closing notes from me around this episode is there is another episode that features X-23, so I'm looking forward to that. And they changed the voice actor in that later episode.
Interesting.
I did see that, because the only problem is anytime I look at the wikis to do research about this, certain things that are spoilers don't get marked as spoilers, so I find out information like that. But luckily enough, our audience has been great of like, they'll say, I want to tell you something, but I'll wait till you get to that episode kind of scenario.
Funny.
So, yeah, so we actually pretty pure with getting to consume these episodes for the first time, which is good. But yeah, I loved that we got to see X-23, and then with that additional context that you had provided, John, it was like, oh, I get why this became a character that they would carry over into the comics itself. So
Yeah, it's clearly like it's a cool concept that's wrapped in a often overused style, which is like, it's a clone. Mm-hmm. But not every clone is made equal in the X-Men like stories. And I mean, she's taken over like so much of the limelight in the comics. In fact, I forgot, there's actually two of her at one point.
yes,
In the comics.
because of the Vault.
Yeah, because she
Yep.
I can't get into it, but there was an old version of her, like
Who's like
500
1,000. Yeah.
a hundreds of years old version, and then the young version of her. That one's gone now.
Yeah.
But she's such a strong concept. I'm glad that out of all the whatever random characters they introduced in this cartoon, she's the one that made it hopped over into the pages. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it probably helped that she's like connected to one of the most popular characters in comics ever,
Especially in the early 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, he was, what, number 2 compared to Spider-Man at that point?
Yeah. No, this was fun. Like I said, like almost like watching it for the first time again, and so it was a delight.
Well, John,
Makes me want to watch the X-Men Evolution show now. I might have to watch it.
There you go.
Well, you have a companion podcast to listen
There
to.
you go.
For it.
There
So,
you
yeah.
go. It all comes back.
Rod, closing thoughts.
No, it was fun. I kind of wish I did get to see it like the first time, because obviously like the whole like surprise at the beginning of like, who is this? It was like, oh, it's X-23.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, no, it was kind of fun. It's also a stark difference from seeing Logan, because that's the X-23 I know. To this, so it was like, oh, okay, we're
Little feral child.
yeah. So it was
so
fun.
good
It was
in
fun
that.
seeing the origins of her.
So to wrap stuff up, John, Stinky Dragon, you guys are doing a rat heist right now. Do you want to talk about that really quickly as we close out?
Sure, we're kind of we're in between campaigns. We just finished our second full campaign called Groteth, and we're jumping into our third campaign, which is called Canon. But we kind of we wanted to make sure that release aligned with this whole thing with Critical Role, and so we wanted to fill some time with a one shot, and so we used this non D&D TTRPG called Maze Rats to do a one shot, and often when we do one shots, it takes 2 episodes to do because we have one shots are usually like a 4 to 6 hour kind of session you do with your friends, and we got to make these into like 2 hours less episodes. But yeah, we all get to be rats. It's me, Gustavo Sorolla, Barbara Dunkelman, and Blaine Gibson are playing the rats, and then it's actually DM'd by our writer, editor, producer, music maker, and my brother Micah Reisinger. And so that's out right now for everybody. So that'll be a couple episodes of that. And then the end of this month, September, I think we said like September 30th, something like that. That's when our brand new campaign comes out. And so that's a very good time to jump on. But I highly recommend people listen to the previous campaigns, or at the very least, check us out on socials, because we have puppets and we have animation, and that's a marketing tool that I think should make everybody go check us out. I think if I say Muppets or puppets, you should go check out our stuff.
Yeah. And part of why I was excited to have John here, in addition to all of his X-Men knowledge, is I am a fan of the Stinky Dragon stuff, like to the point where I'm wearing the merch as we're recording. So
It's a good show.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah. So again, John, thank you so much for joining us. We'll make sure all your links are in the description for this. And to our listeners, thank you guys so much for joining us, and also our viewers too, because we're now doing this on video. This is only our second video episode, so not everybody knows that. If you have any thoughts, make sure you drop them into the comments for either the YouTube upload or the official Instagram post for this, as well as the Spotify, because they have comments now too. If you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on the podcast app of your choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, and CastBox. And Rod, your cat is just so patient today and didn't even move the entire time.
She's been sitting back here for the last like 6 hours because I've been doing several podcasts.
That's fun.